Hello, good morning, and welcome to Morning Brew on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes. It is Wednesday, the 15th of November 2023. Hello, everyone in the chat there. We've got Reagan Elite, we've got Anglo Norse, we've got Peter, we've got Bez Ruth, Bezroth, is it? Vendetta, and Uncle Heavy, and everyone. Anyway, listen, right? So it all kicked off again in the Tory party. They said back in 2015. There was a bit of a problem because of all the Eurosceptics in the Tory party. So what they decided to do, and this was very clever, they decided to have an EU referendum, right? And that meant there'll be no more infighting ever again. That would stop the infighting in the Tory party. It would be a straight in and out referendum, and the Prime Minister would stay on even if he lost, which he didn't. And everything would be wonderful and perfect and amazing. It reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if you've seen the Mitchell and Webb sketch where they're plotting to assassinate Princess Diana. And one of the plotters says, "Why are we doing this again?" And like, "Oh, she's far too famous. If we just bump her off, then no one will ever think or talk about her ever again." Yeah, that's what the Tories have done. We'll leave the EU and then there'll be no more Tory infighting. Everyone will be happy. Happy little bumblebees. Unfortunately, that came up against cold, hard reality that the Tories will never be happy. That gammon will never be happy. Racists will never be happy. Misogynists will never be happy. Transphobes, homophobes will never be happy. So instead of having a situation in which, let's say, if the referendum result actually reflected the population of the country, which it didn't, but let's say it did, if we had stayed in the EU, 48% of the country would be happy and only 52% would be unhappy. Oh, they're coming to take me away. I don't know if you can hear that siren in the background. However, as things have transpired, we've left the EU and the Remainers, like myself, are not happy, and the Brexiteers, like Cruella Braverman, let's have a look, also not happy. Nadine Dorries, also not happy. Nigel Farage, also not happy. Boris Johnson, well, he lives in his own little world, doesn't he? My God, the shit we've had to put up with for the last 13 years because these dickheads in power. Let's have a look at the papers. These are the papers for tomorrow, for today even. It's called Tomorrow's Papers today, this site. So we've got the Tory graph there. Braverman launches brutal attack on PM's betrayal of nation. Betrayal. Betrayed. Yeah. She's upset because, that wildly unpopular policy of hers. All of them. Yeah, that's a betrayal of the nation, apparently, even though they're wildly unpopular. And the mirror here, just above my head, is perfect. Tories are revolting. That's all you need to say, really, isn't it? Cruella Savage's Sunak, and a great little dig here at the bottom. Maybe, here's a suggestion. They could try running the country for a bit instead. ... Yeah, maybe they could do that. Maybe they could totally do that. We had a deal and you broke it. Cruella tells PM. But Rishi hate the way they use their first names. I don't mind if you're going to use it to like make fun of them and call them like Cruella or something. But like Cruella, Rishi, Boris, it's like no. They never refer to Keir Starmer as Keir, do they? It's always Starmer. It's always Starmer in the Daily Mail. And apparently, someone bought some Manolos in his mistress's size, and I knew it was over. That's a terrible story there for the people who read the Daily Mail, and they need to know what the rich and posh are up to. I made the mistake of listening to a bit of Radio 4 this morning, and oh my God, it sounded like, is there a movie where with Dennis Quaid in it before he went mad? And like he tunes his radio and he can hear his dad in the past, and they can talk to each other through the radio. Is it Frequency? Was that the movie Frequency? Was it? Someone look it up. Elves, look it up. There's no one here, just me. That's how I feel when I turn on Radio 4. It's like I've just tuned into 1958, and it's like all these posh people going, oh, you really are. That's it. And I'm like, I want to hear the news. Just tell me what the news is. It's like, no. We need to hear from these posh people first. What do you think of that posh person? What did you do last night? I went to see some more posh people doing posh things. Radio 4, ladies and gentlemen. I can't listen to LBC in the morning because Nick Ferrari. So, I don't know. I can listen to Radio 6 music, which is pretty good, but you don't really get the news on that. We need a news channel on the radio that we can listen to in the morning, right? On our commute in the morning. We need to be able to listen to a radio station that caters to, like, people like us, the normal people. They don't sound like this. No, they don't sound like this at all. They actually sound like normal people. Thank you very much to One Angry Pagan for the £2 super chat. It's like having teenagers in government. It's worse than teenagers. You can reason with teenagers, like, and teenagers aren't all bad. That's what these people are they're just horrible. Anyway, back to the papers. Braverman says, PM lied to me and betrayed Britain. As I said in the blurb for this, I thought that, like, betraying Britain, being a traitor, lying to the country, I thought that was like, that was the job description for the Tories when they go into power. Revenge served hot is the title in the Eye. Betraying the nation, no mandate, incapable, magical thinking, uncertain, weak, and lacking in the qualities of leadership that this country needs. I mean, she's right, of course, but you could also say that about her. And I will. She betrayed the nation. She had no mandate. She is incapable. She is guilty of magical thinking. She is uncertain, weak, and lacking in the qualities of leadership that this country needs, like any sort of compassion or empathy, because she's a psychopath. War is declared, says the Daily Express. Cruella accuses Rishi of betraying the nation. Well, this is going to get interesting. This is going to get pretty spicy pretty quick. Tories in a tiz there. The Daily Star, taken over from the Daily Sports as the most ridiculous newspaper, but hilarious, in its own little way. Handbagged. Sacked Cruella accuses Rishi of betraying Britain. She says he is weak and a bit wet and a loser. There you go. And they put him in a handbag. There you go. Don't forget, it was the Star who had the lettuce that outlived the premiership of Liz Truss. So moving back to the intro there for some reason, because I didn't turn it off. Silly boy. That photo of Cruella is my new sleep paralysis demon. Thanks. Sorry, God. Do you know what? One of the things I said earlier this week that when she resigned was like, oh, brilliant. We don't have to see her stupid, bloody, ugly face anymore. I don't know. We shouldn't do ad hominems, but oh my God, she's evil Dobby. If she wasn't so evil, I wouldn't pick on her. Do you know what I mean? And she can't hear me. She's not going to be listening to this. She's not going to take personal offense. But yeah, I'm sure her husband loves her. Oh my God. There's someone out there for everyone, it seems. On YouTube, Lisa Garrard, Now We Are Free, original music. That's great. I wonder if they could play the song for Cruella in Rwanda when she was deported there. Depends what kind of leadership you're looking for, Graham. If you want a tool that does exactly what you want and divides the people, she's absolutely the perfect leader for the rich. Well, yes, absolutely. And let's not forget, like, the rich totally run everything in this country. They run absolutely everything. That's why you're not going to see any improvements in anything with the Tories in charge. Like, anything that you do in your daily life. You're not going to see, there's people working. There's people working in this country, right? Maybe more than one job. And the companies that they work for don't pay them enough, right? So we, the taxpayer, tops up their money, which effectively goes to the big company that they work for, because it obviously goes to the shareholders, the money that they save by not paying the people that work for them enough. Which is exactly the same thing they have in America with Walmart, where people are on food stamps who work at Walmart in America. It's an absolute disgrace. No, make these big companies pay their employees the right amount of money so they don't have to be propped up by the government. They don't need, either have universal basic income, or you simply just, make these companies pay the people what they need to live on. Well, actually, no, not just to live on, not just to survive, but to actually thrive, That'll be good. But no, we basically essentially hand vast amounts of money, taxpayers' money, to the rich, because shareholders in these big companies are already rich. We make the wealthy wealthier. That is all we do in this country at the moment, and it's painful. It's painful. The other big news this morning is that first of all, inflation has gone down naturally, as we said it would do. So Rishi Sunak's chalking that up as a big win for Rishi Sunak when they've done nothing. They've done nothing. If anything, they delayed it going down. And don't forget, the bath is still filling with water. It's just filling up a little slower. That is all. It's at 4.7%, I think it is. It's still ridiculously high and still way more than twice the amount that the Bank of England wants as the baseline of inflation, which is 2%. Picking on evil people isn't bullying. Thank you very much. Well, yes, picking on a bully. She is a bully, as her predecessor was as well. And also, she's very rich and very powerful and well connected. So, yeah, I can't really say I can bully her. Yes. And then the other bit of big news this morning is going to be the Supreme Court ruling on the deporting of asylum seekers to Rwanda. Now, I've got my other screen on here. I've got the BBC on here. As soon as that news comes in, it's scheduled to come in at 10 o'clock this morning. As soon as that comes on, I'll be all over it. I hope it doesn't go the government's way, because the idea of sending innocent women and children who are actually asylum seekers, we're not talking about men coming from Albania as economic expats or whatever you want to call them. No. We're talking about women and children who have fled war, fled their family, they fled their village, their town, their city, left behind everything they have and own, and taken what little they had in a holdall and paid thousands of pounds to their entire savings to cross the channel to come here. Because that's the only way you can claim asylum in this country if you're not from Ukraine, Hong Kong, or perhaps Afghanistan. But that's a bit of bullshit, actually, Afghanistan. Let's cross that off the list. Let's just say Ukraine and Hong Kong, you can claim asylum by getting on a flight or traveling here. In fact, actually, if you're from Ukraine, you have to apply while you're not in the country. Okay, so that's a thing that we can do. We can get people who are sitting in Calais waiting to come over. We can get them to apply in Calais. And then if their application is successful, we can bring them over on the ferry. They can literally get a ticket on the ferry. That's something that can happen. They get on Eurostar if they want. They can fly. They don't have to come across in a dangerous boat that puts their lives at risk. So we're talking about getting innocent women and children fleeing persecution. Our job, under Article 14 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, our job as a wealthy nation that signed up to the 1951 Declaration on Human Rights, the Refugee Convention in 1951 as well. I think we're the first to sign up. We're the first country in the world to sign up and say, yes, we will take our fair share of people fleeing war, fleeing conflict. Because we were so goddamn embarrassed we were about what we had done in the run-up to World War II, where we had stopped Jewish people who were fleeing the Nazis from coming here. We separated off parents from their children, and we only allowed their children on the kinder transport to come over if they were sponsored by a British family. And although 1,000 Jewish children were saved, they were separated from their families, and nearly all of those children ended up orphans as their parents perished in the Holocaust. And we had a hand in that. We obviously didn't have a hand in the actual mechanics of the Holocaust, but we could have provided somewhere safe for people to come, but we didn't. We chose not to. We chose to turn our nose away from them and let them die. And we had to live with that back then because it was the same generation that was voting that had allowed that to happen. And people said never again. And that's why our politicians signed up to these international treaties saying that we would take our fair share of asylum seekers, fair share of refugees. We don't take our fair share. Countries like Turkey, countries like Papua New Guinea take more than their fair share of refugees. We take hardly any in comparison to our population and our wealth. However, this plan, this disgusting, immoral, grotesque plan to send people to Rwanda. Let's talk about Rwanda for a moment. Rwanda is a beautiful country. It's where the Gorillas in the Mist are, made famous by that movie. I've forgotten his name. And with Sigourney Weaver, about Diane Fossey, who looked after the gorillas in Rwanda before she was horrifically murdered in her bed. And it's also the place where the 1994 genocide took place, when the Hutus and the Tutsis effectively went into civil war. It wasn't much of a war. It was very one-sided, and the Hutus massacred the Tutsis, who had been basically put in charge of the country by the colonial overlords of the Belgians back in the day. It was a big, massive uprising against people who were from the Tutsi tribe, even though it was a bit manufactured at that point, because the Hutus and the Tutsis hadn't actually been totally separate tribes for over 100 years by then. Because of, about 100 years actually, because of interference by Europeans. There was a stage where the Europeans would literally look at people and say, you are a Hutu and you are a Tutsi. And you were given a ID card that had on it whether you were a Hutu or a Tutsi. And as a result, if you didn't show your ID card, they assumed you were a Tutsi and they killed you. And there was 800,000 people were killed in the space of a couple of months with machetes. One of the things that people weirdly say about the Holocaust is like, they couldn't have killed that many people in that space of time. Yeah, they had about 6 years during World War II. In Rwanda, they had 2 months, and they managed to get nearly over a sixth of the way there in 2 months with machetes. Okay, so you can imagine, like, that is just where Rwanda is coming from. And although Rwanda is like I say, it's a beautiful country, it is a lot cleaner and a lot more mild-mannered and organised, and there's less crime than other countries around in Central Africa. However, it has been run by a guy called Paul Kagame forever, for a couple of decades now. And Paul Kagame is not a very nice person. He is a dictator who has a habit of just, killing people who he disagrees with. There was a protest at a refugee camp in 2019. That was only 4 years ago, in which the people in the refugee camp were shot dead by the security services there in Rwanda. And then in 2020, a year later, the guy who Hotel Rwanda was about, if you ever saw that movie, I think Don Cheadle played the guy, his name, Paul something. Someone will tell me in the chat, I'm sure. He was on a plane going to somewhere in Africa, and they had the plane diverted, so it landed in Rwanda. He was arrested and tortured. He was arrested, detained, put on a mock sham trial, and he was tortured by the regime. That was literally last year. That went till he managed to get out. He's back in the States now, I think. But we're going to send innocent women and children to Rwanda, a place that is unstable, a place that has got a strongman dictator in charge, a place where I think I'm trying to just think of the figures here. I think 6,000 people. 6,000? Someone look this up. 6,000 people left last year as refugees from this place that we want to send refugees to. Right? I mean, there's things that are a bit wrong, and there's things that are grossly immoral. Sending people to Rwanda who have committed no crime, punishing them in this way, and making it so that even if once their processing is complete and it's shown that they are genuine refugees, and don't forget, Cruella Braverman does not want to make anyone who's a woman or anyone who's gay eligible for asylum, even if they're coming from a country that practices female genital mutilation, or if they're coming from a country where being gay results in the death penalty. That's not enough for Cruella Braverman to think that people are being persecuted, because she's the most evil blob that has ever existed. It's interesting that she talks about blobs quite a lot. All I can say to her is, "Where is your chin?" Which is a line from the Preacher comic, if you ever read that. Real Phil, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. Special 2 fingers up to Cruella Braverman. My other half from the Dominican Republic will be granted citizenship on the 29th of November. 7-year battle. Good job, Real Phil. I love a bit of Dominican Republic. It is a wonderful, wonderful place. Really friendly people. They tortured Don Cheadle. No, the guy who Don Cheadle played in the movie. The problem is that people don't realize the devastation of industrialized war. There's a video about that on YouTube. The Great War in Numbers should be mandatory for schools to show pupils. Indeed. My mate's Filipino wife is finding it tough, though. That's from Gary. Well, they're trying to stop anyone who looks like Cruella Braverman coming into the country. That's what she's trying to do. And picking up the baton there from Priti Patel, who tried to do exactly the same thing. And it's like, well, no, I'm one of the good ones. I'm one of the good ones. So if we go to the Supreme Court now in the UK, we'll just go over there. Just because if you look directly above my head, you might be able to see one of Steve Bray's signs. It looks like Steve Bray is actually there outside the court. We should be getting the ruling in about 7 minutes' time, if it's on time. But yeah. Israel already tried to use Rwanda as a third country for refugees. They withdrew from it. That's a very good point, Christopher. And also, it's mirroring the scheme that was done in Australia, where they sent people coming on boats over to Nauru, this little tiny island nation just below the equator, hundreds of miles from Australia. They sent people over there, and it was a disaster. People killed themselves. Nauru itself is a bit of an economic and ecological disaster. I've spoken about it before on this channel. I could do a whole episode on Nauru and how it's like a microcosm for the rest of the world, because they dug up all their natural resources, got rid of it, and then created an environmental and economic tragedy. Catastrophe. Ironic that Cruella looks like a blobfish. She certainly does look like a blobfish. Actually, blobfishes don't look so bad when they're in the deep ocean. It's just that when they're brought up to the surface, the difference in pressure makes them sort of turn into a big blob. They used to make kids watch Threads in the 1980s. Yes, they did, Tox. Like me. And When the Wind Blows, which was also absolutely terrifying. At this point, we need to acknowledge that international law doesn't matter to our current establishment. Yes, they're only breaking the law in a limited and specific way. Now, whatever happens in the next few minutes with the Supreme Court, the Tories are going to spin it as a win, because they're going to say, if the Supreme Court says, yeah, it's all right to deport innocent women and children to this dictatorship in Central Africa that no gammon can actually point out on a map. They don't know where it is. They've never been there. They don't know anything about it. They just know it's a place that's sufficiently far away to put these people who are causing all the problems in our country at the moment. Not Tories. Not Tories. No, refugees. That they cause all the problems. And people believe this. I've spoken to people in the pub who honestly believe that all of our problems, inflation, lack of trade, lack of investment, the interest rates going through the roof, the fuel bills going through the roof, people losing their homes, rent going up, mortgages going, they think it's all because of refugees. Which is almost quite impressive. So yeah, if they win, they'll say, yay, we won. If they lose, they'll say, yay, let's leave the European Convention of Human Rights. And if we do leave the European Convention on Human Rights, then we are in for a world of shit, because the Tories just want to protect themselves. Isabel Oakes shit, who was on one of the news programs, talking head thing, as they always are, was on the other day on this panel. There were 4 of them, all privately educated, all sitting there going, chanting away, oh, yeah, sure they win, like this. And Isabel Oakes shit sits up and she says, I think that protest should be banned. I'm sorry, I spat all over the microphone there. And I'm just like, okay, so she wants to take away one of the few ways that we actually get to say what we think about what the government's doing, about what the people in charge are doing. She's got it. She went to a posh private school, mate. She was born into money. She was born into the upper class elite, right? She has no worries, because she can just turn up on any TV station At any time of the day, she could turn up on bloody Jackanory if she wanted to. She'll show a little card that says, I'm part of the upper class elite, and go like, excuse me, I want to come on this program to talk to the children about how bad it is that we help refugees. And you're like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, let's let her on to Jackanory. Let's let her on to CBeebies. Let's let her on to GBBs. Let's let her on Talk TV. Let's let her on the BBC, reading the newspapers that she writes for. And oh my God. And this is a Brexit. And she's saying that she wants to take away our right to protest. At all. Because she knows that it won't affect her. And you see this with everything the Tories fucking well do. Sorry to swearing, it just winds me up so much that everything the Tories do does not affect them. Doesn't affect them, doesn't affect their families. They're quids in either way. The wealthy get wealthier. Brexit is the best example of this. Now, if you want to live in any of the other countries in Europe, it's going to cost you hundreds of pounds. It used to be free. I mean, you'd have to pay for your rent or your mortgage, or you had to, get a job and stuff to buy food. I mean, they didn't give you free food, but you didn't have to pay and ask someone's permission to go and live in frickin' Spain, or Malta, or Slovenia, or Croatia, or Poland, or Germany, or Austria, or... Anyway, Rachel, thank you. Sorry, calm me down. Calm, breathe. Bloody Tories. I'm going to stick this in my ear so I can hear what they're saying. And I can knock up the sound for you in a moment. It's just the weather at the moment. Rachel, thank you very much for the super chat. We, the Blobfish Labour Movement, found that last comment insulting. Sorry, Rachel. Sorry. Power to the people and the Blobfishers. One angry pagan, £2 middle class. What? No, I'm reading your message here. Pulling up the drawbridge. How upper middle class? Yeah. And this is the thing, like, so many people who are middle class who went for Brexit, like, they've screwed they've screwed themselves, and they've also destroyed the future for their own children. Like, this country is going to find it so difficult to get our economy back on track. 16 years now, 16 years, no growth. The population has grown by 6 million. So the population's grown by 6%. Our economy has grown by 0%. So per person, our GDP per capita went down from 50,000 to 45,000. Great. Anyway, right. I'm going to head over to the news now. Here we go. We've got like a little countdown thing going on here. Don't know why I went over to the news then. I was getting excited. I thought, oh, they've finished the adverts or whatever. Not that they have adverts on the BBC. But, we can watch their fancy graphics. I hope we don't get done for copyright infringement. We're commenting on the graphics. Look at this. BBC always do really good idents. Do you know what I mean? Like, they always look really classy. I know it's ITV. It's always like yellow and blue. It's always a bit naff. But they know what they're doing on the BBC. They've got some really good designers in. Oak shit divorced from her husband and the kids live with him. Oh, really? That doesn't surprise me. I'm sure he's probably had to get a restraining order out on her. Why is Cruella not talking about her sex scandal? Oh, yes. She's part of a group of Buddhists who worship her or were led by a sex offender. Does the European Convention of Human Rights departure affect the Good Friday Agreement? Yes, it does, because our membership of the ECHR underpins the Good Friday Agreement. Oh, we're going to Israel. Okay, so they're talking about the Israeli-Gaza war there. I'm assuming they're going to go straight to the Supreme Court if anything comes on. So we'll keep an eye on that. Obviously, it's past 10 o'clock now, normally time for me to clock out. But I will just stay on for a little while longer. Immediately after this, I'll be heading over to the Discord server. If you are a patron or a YouTube member, you can come and join us on the Discord server. If you're having trouble getting on, let me know. I'll send you a link, and just click on the link and you sign up. It's really simple. And there's a group there called like After Hours or something. There you go. Rwanda asylum plan. There's Steve. There's Steve there. Stop the Tories. Okay. All right. So they're just saying that they're gonna come live from the Supreme Court. Yeah, so I'm going to be on the Discord server after this. Also, tomorrow night at 8:30, I'm going to be doing a special show just on Discord. So it's just going to be for the people who are patrons and members of this channel. So please join me for that. And also, PMQs at 12 o'clock today. The BBC is saying the Supreme Court decision will be around 10:15. Right then. Okay, right. And we're going back to Israel. Oh, hang on. Here we go.
Overseas, while their claims for asylum in the UK are processed by the UK authorities. The Home Secretary's policy is that people claiming asylum in the UK will not have their claims decided by the UK authorities. Instead, they will be sent to Rwanda, where they can claim asylum in Rwanda. Their claims will be decided there by the Rwandan authorities. If their claims are successful, they will be granted asylum in Rwanda. If their claims are unsuccessful, Rwanda is entitled to expel them from its territory. In this appeal, the Supreme Court is required to decide whether that policy is lawful. That is a legal question which the court has to decide on the basis of the evidence and established legal principles. The court is not concerned with the political debate about the policy, and nothing in its judgment should be regarded as supporting or opposing any political view of the issues. In view of the public importance of this appeal, the court has expedited the production of its judgment and as a result is able to give judgment within a shorter period of time than in most of its cases.
Why?
There is a legal rule that refugees must not be returned to their countries of origin, either directly or indirectly, if their life or freedom would be threatened in that country. That rule is called the principle of non-refoulement. One of the consequences of the rule is that asylum seekers cannot be returned to their countries of origin without a proper consideration of their claims, since asylum seekers whose claims have not been properly considered could well be genuine refugees. And as I've explained, refugees must not be returned to their countries of origin.
Okay.
This legal principle of non-refoulement is laid down in the United Nations Refugee Convention, to which the UK is a party.
1951, I think.
There are also provisions which have the same effect in other treaties to which the UK is a party. The UN Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment, the UN International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the European Convention on Human Rights. It is therefore not only the European Convention on Human Rights which is relevant to this case, as is sometimes thought. There are other international treaties which also prohibit the return of asylum seekers to their countries of origin without a proper examination of their claims. These international treaties are reflected in our domestic law. In the first place, there are several Acts of Parliament which give effect to the principle of non-refoulement as set out in the UN Refugee Convention. They include the Asylum and Immigration Appeals Act of 1993, the Nationality, Immigration and Asylum Act of 2002, and the Asylum and Immigration Treatment of Claimants, etc. Act of 2004.
I'm going to call it.
There is also an Act of Parliament, the Human Rights Act of 1998, which gives effect to the European Convention on Human Rights.
Get on with it.
Again, contrary to what is sometimes thought, the Human Rights Act is not the only relevant legislation. The effect of the legislation, in general terms, is to prohibit the removal of asylum seekers whose claims have not been decided to a country where there are substantial grounds for believing that they would be at real risk of refoulement. The issue the court has to decide is whether the Home Secretary's policy breaches that prohibition. For the asylum claims with which this appeal is concerned, the basis of the Rwanda policy is contained in the Home Secretary's immigration rules, which are statements of administrative practice. Under those rules, asylum claims can be treated as inadmissible if the claimants had the opportunity to apply for asylum in a safe third country but did not do so. The claimants can then be removed to any safe third country which agrees to accept them. A country only qualifies as a safe third country under the rules if the principle of non-refoulement is respected there, in accordance with the UN Refugee Convention. It is the next step which is controversial in these proceedings. That is, the Home Secretary's guidance to the officials who apply the rules that Rwanda is a safe third country. That is to say, a country where asylum seekers will not be at risk of refoulement, a certificate, and also her certificates to that effect under the relevant legislation.
Paul McCartney.
There is no dispute between the Home Secretary and the claimants in this case as to the legal test which the court has to apply. The test is whether there are substantial grounds for believing that asylum seekers who are sent to Rwanda will be at real risk of ill treatment as a consequence of refoulement. If there are no such grounds, the policy is lawful. If there are such grounds, the policy is unlawful. It is argued on behalf of the Home Secretary that there are no substantial grounds for believing that asylum seekers who are sent to Rwanda will be at risk of refoulement. A memorandum of understanding has been entered into between the UK and Rwandan governments, which includes an undertaking that asylum seekers will not be subject to refoulement. Although the Memorandum of Understanding is not legally binding and cannot be relied on by asylum seekers, the Home Secretary says that Rwanda can be relied on to comply with it. There are financial incentives for Rwanda to comply with the memorandum, and it establishes arrangements for monitoring Rwanda's compliance. As against that, UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency, has produced evidence of a number of deficiencies in the Rwandan asylum system. The relevance of that evidence is that if claims are not dealt with properly, then genuine claims are liable to be wrongly refused. And when claims are refused, Rwanda is entitled, under the memorandum, to expel the claimants to any country where they have a right to reside. The only country where most people have a right to reside is their country of origin. So if Rwanda does not have an adequate system for processing asylum claims, genuine refugees may be returned to their countries of origin. In other words, they may be subject to refoulement. In addition, UNHCR has produced evidence of a substantial number of cases of refoulement of asylum seekers by the Rwandan authorities, including during the period since a Memorandum of Understanding with the UK was concluded.
Oh, wow. Damning.
It has also produced evidence of Rwanda's failure to comply with a similar agreement which it entered into with Israel.
Yes, which failed.
When this case came before the Divisional Court, it failed to give proper consideration to UNHCR's evidence. That was a mistake. UNHCR has unrivaled practical experience of the working of the asylum system in Rwanda through long years of involvement there, and its evidence requires careful consideration. So the Court of Appeal was right to overturn the High Court's decision and to consider the evidence again for itself. It concluded by majority that asylum seekers who are sent to Rwanda are at real risk of refoulement, and that the policy is therefore unlawful.
Yes.
The question for this court is whether they were entitled to reach that conclusion on the evidence. The Court of Appeal based their conclusion on the following evidence. First, Rwanda has a poor human rights record. In recent times, British police have had to warn Rwandan nationals living in the UK of credible plans by the Rwandan government to kill them.
Jesus Christ.
In 2021, the UK government criticised the Rwandan government for extrajudicial killings, deaths in custody, enforced disappearances, and torture. There are also concerns about media and political freedom in Rwanda. Since Rwanda has ratified many international human rights conventions, this evidence raises questions as to its compliance with its international obligations. It's also relevant to the question whether the Rwandan courts can be expected to act independently of the Rwandan government when deciding appeals against the Rwandan government's decisions on asylum claims. Secondly, UNHCR's evidence is that there are systemic defects in Rwanda's procedures and institutions for processing asylum claims. To mention only some of the points raised, they include, first, concerns about the asylum process itself, such as the lack of legal representation, the risk that judges and lawyers will not act independently of the government in politically sensitive cases, and the fact that the right of appeal to the High Court, which has existed in theory since 2018, has never, in fact, been exercised. Secondly, Rwanda's 100% rate of rejection of asylum claims from countries in known conflict zones from which asylum seekers removed from the UK may well come, such as Syria, Yemen, and Afghanistan, although the UK authorities often find that such claims are well-founded. Thirdly, Rwanda's practice of refoulement, of which UNHCR gave over 100 examples, which continued during the period after the UK's agreement with Rwanda was concluded. And fourthly, the Rwandan government's apparent misunderstanding of its obligations under the Refugee Convention. The third matter raised is, in UNHCR's evidence, is Rwanda's failure to fulfill undertakings which it gave to the government of Israel under an agreement for the removal of asylum seekers from Israel to Rwanda, which operated between 2013 and 2018. In terms of the agreement, asylum seekers sent from Israel to Rwanda were to be allowed to claim asylum there, and there was an explicit undertaking by Rwanda to comply with the principle of non-refoulement. The agreement was therefore similar in those respects to Rwanda's agreement with the UK. Despite the terms of the agreement, asylum seekers who were sent to Rwanda by the Israeli government were routinely moved clandestinely to a neighbouring country from which they were liable to be refooled. That evidence is not contradicted, and it raises a serious question as to whether the undertakings given by Rwanda under its agreement with the UK government can be relied on. As I've explained, the legal test which has to be applied in this case is whether there are substantial grounds for believing that asylum seekers sent to Rwanda would be at real risk of refoulement. In the light of the evidence which I have summarised, the Court of Appeal concluded that there were such grounds. We are unanimously of the view that they were entitled to reach that conclusion.
Hooray, that's it.
Indeed, having been taken through the evidence ourselves, we agree with their conclusion. We accept the Home Secretary's submission that the Rwandan government entered into the agreement in good faith, and that the capacity of the Rwandan system to produce accurate and fair decisions can and will be built up. Nevertheless, asking ourselves whether there were substantial grounds for believing that a real risk of refoulement existed at the relevant time, we have concluded that there were. The changes needed to eliminate the risk of refoulement may be delivered in the future, but they have not been shown to be in place now. The Home Secretary's appeal is therefore dismissed.
Yes!
There is also a cross-appeal on behalf of one of the asylum claimants who argues that the Rwandan policy is in breach of retained EU law, as well as being unlawful for the reasons that I've already explained. We reject that argument on the basis that under an Act of Parliament enacted in 2020, the EU provisions in question ceased to have effect at the end of that year. The cross-appeal is therefore also dismissed. The court will now adjourn.
Woo! Brilliant. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The Tories have lost. They have lost. The woman who puts awful into unlawful has well and truly lost. The UK government loses Supreme Court ruling. That's the headline on the BBC there. If we just go over there. UK government loses Supreme Court Rwanda ruling, quite rightly as well. The really interesting thing that I thought that was said there was that actually this was a case not just under the law set down by the European Convention of Human Rights, but also by various UN treaties. So these dickheads going, oh, we've got to leave the ECHR, even though they don't know what it is. We've got to get rid of it, or, we won't be able to do what we want to do. And it's like, yeah, we'll also have to leave the UN. Do you want to leave the UN? You want to leave the UN? Come on, even Switzerland joined the UN eventually. Does it make you wonder how the hell Cruella got a law degree? Yeah, but I mean, they never did this thinking it would work. They did it because they wanted the headlines, they wanted to be in the news, they wanted to set the agenda of like what we talked about, set the narrative. The Tories love doing that because we end up talking about the Tories. Someone asked me on the comments the other day, why are you always like bashing the Tories? Why aren't you more like pro-Labour? And it's like, they just take up all the oxygen. All of our every day. It's like, oh God, what now? What have they done? But yeah, the Tories have lost. That is fantastic news for everyone who is born with a sense of morality, decency, honour, and respect. And I just want to thank the people watching this, but obviously huge kudos to the UN High Commission on Human Rights, on refugees, for giving all this evidence. 100 examples of refoulement of asylum seekers. That's why they're sent back to where they came from, even though there's an issue with them possibly getting killed if they're sent back, and 100% rejection of asylum claims from places like Syria, which, I mean, have you seen Syria recently? No, there's a reason for that. Anyway, so brilliant, all good stuff. Andrew Pierce already at it on Twitter. So if you want to head over to Twitter now and mercilessly take the piss out of the Tories on there, and be sure to point out when they're whining into their cornflakes about the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. When they're whining about that, you need to make the point that they specifically mentioned that it would be illegal under UN law. So even if we pulled out of the European Convention of Human Rights, like Russia and Belarus, even if we did that, it would still be against the law because we're part of the UN. So there you go. End of. Steve's there in the background. You can see him there. He's walking around with his sign, Stop the Tories. Bless him. I'm banned on Twitter. We'll get over to Threads. At Graham David Hughes, I am on Threads. Hey, listen, at the end of the month, I'm heading over to Ukraine with some toys for the kids over there in Kharkiv and other places. So if you want to help with that, we're going to be taking Lego over because it's kind of unisex and there's lots of kids, and it'd be a nice present for them. Yeah, we're hoping to take over 200 boxes of Lego to kids over there. And if you want to help out with that, head over to ukr.com, and there's more details on there about how you can donate and help. Actually, give these kids a Christmas present this year, because there's a good chance they're not going to get one. These are kids at children's centres across Ukraine who might have lost their parents in the ongoing conflict. I'd like to do more. I'd like to do more about what's happening in Gaza at the moment, but I at least I know I can fill a van full of toys and take it to Ukraine. I can actually do that. It's within my realms of capability, to put it that way. So if you want to support that, UK for UKR. I'll be back at 12 o'clock for a very, very spicy Prime Minister's questions, and also we've got more politics today, because there is going to be the vote, I think, today on calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Which is going to be difficult for Labour. Obviously, there's a lot of tension between people who say, "Oh, we need these humanitarian pauses," and people saying, "Oh no, but we need a ceasefire." And I don't really know the difference between the two, but yeah, apparently Keir Starmer does. I will swat up on it. Maybe we'll get Phil on to talk about it, because he seems to understand what's going through Keir Starmer's head, even when I don't. Anyway, so thanks very much for watching. I'll leave you in the safe capable hands of James O'Brien. If you want to come over to the Discord server, if you are a YouTube member or a Discord, Patreon member, you'll be able to get access to that. I'm going to be over there for the next half an hour or so. So I will see you there. And until then, great news, good news, everyone. The Tories lost again, the losers. And thankfully, people will not be being sent on planes to Rwanda. Cruella's dream has just turned to dust, turned to ashes in her mouth. Good. Oh, and she's lost her job, and she's whinging about it, so she might also lose the whip. Good week for the country, bad week for Cruella. I just kind of go hand in hand, really, if you think about it. So until I see you next, hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.